Peace, love, liberty, radio.
And the walls come crashing down as the war at home reaches your town. You have no choice, it's safe and clean. We all submit to the war machine.
So the audio book is almost done. It's been recorded, it's been edited, and now I just have to go through and make sure that there are no mistakes that I left in during the initial editing. And there's still time for you to basically pre-order a copy of the audiobook for as little as $5. Basically, you name your own price for the audiobook as part of the fundraiser. So I'm giving all donors the audiobook or the ebook for free, along with whatever other perks they would get. So there's a possibility that you could get the audiobook and the ebook and a physical copy of the book extremely cheaply. And I realize that I'm not going to hit the fundraising goal unless there's miracle angel donors that come in these last few days. But you can still, for as little as $5, donate to the fundraiser for A Rebel's Journey. You can find more about that or donate at arebelsjourney.com. I'll put the link for the actual fundraiser in the show notes. It links from arebelsjourney.com, but I'll put the link in the show notes for that. And I'm really excited about the book, and I'm looking forward to getting this in the hands of as many people as possible. And there's some big news that happened last week, actually, and I did not get a chance to talk about it on Friday, but I will talk about it today. And the news that came out late last month came out on the 28th, which would have actually been Tuesday, so happened somewhat earlier in the week than what I thought. I think because Wednesday was the Ask Me Anything, and I had other stuff to talk about on Wednesday, and then on Friday I didn't get around to it. But the White House finally, after 2 years, finally put out an official response to the petition to pardon Edward Snowden. Let me actually, before I read the response, let me read the petition. And these petitions are not as detailed as I would like some of them to be. But that's because they limit how many words you can wind up putting in one of these petitions. So the petition, which started in June 2013, read, Edward Snowden is a national hero and should be immediately issued a full, free, and absolute pardon for any crimes he has committed or may have committed related to blowing the whistle on secret NSA surveillance programs. So that was June 9th, 2013 when that was published. It wound up receiving 167,955 signatures, virtual signatures on the petitions.whitehouse.gov website over the course of 30 days. And finally, 2 years later, the White House issued an official response that says, "Thanks for signing a petition about Edward Snowden. This is an issue that many Americans feel strongly about. Because his actions have had serious consequences for our national security, we took this matter to Lisa Monaco, the President's advisor on Homeland Security and Counterterrorism. Here's what she had to say." And the rest of this is from Lisa Monaco, the President's advisor on Homeland Security and Counterterrorism. She writes, "Since taking office, President Obama has worked with Congress to secure appropriate reforms that balance the protection of civil liberties with the ability of national security professionals to secure information vital to keep Americans safe." Really? I didn't think that my civil liberties at all were being protected by the NSA with their snooping and their spying and being able to tell who and where and why and what. The metadata some people will say, well, it's just metadata. It doesn't give you any information about what was said on the phone call. It just tells you who and when and how long. But there was research, and I'll try to find the link to this research, and I'll put it in the show notes, where there was a college professor that did a study on people and their metadata, with their permission, of course. And he was able to determine that one woman was pregnant. He was able to determine that someone else was cheating on their spouse. And all of this other stuff based solely on the metadata of telephone calls, of when calls took place, repeat numbers. He was able to determine that certain people were relatives that were being called, or really good friends. Like he knew, like this person, they're being called 3 times a day. It's probably a very close acquaintance. There was another number he was able to determine based on the time of the telephone call that they were calling, like some pregnancy hotline. And, things can be determined just by looking at the metadata. The response from the White House continues. As the president said in announcing recent intelligence reforms, quote, "We have to make some important decisions about how to protect ourselves and sustain our leadership in the world while upholding the civil liberties and privacy protections that our ideals and our Constitution require." Now, see, it seems to me that he only wants to have protections that the Constitution require. And, well, the Constitution requires a warrant for any search that is not reasonable. So, they're claiming that all of this is reasonable, and, well, what's not reasonable? We have this blatant warrant that says we can search anybody for anything because the secret court said we could. The response continues. Instead of constructively addressing these issues, Mr. Snowden's dangerous decision to steal and disclose classified information had severe consequences for the security of our country and the people who work day in and day out to protect it. Really? I did not realize that anything Edward Snowden did was dangerous to national security. Now, it was dangerous to the people that are putting up the front of security theater. It was dangerous to their theater. It's dangerous to the people that are doing the spying and prying, because now they're not doing it in secret. People know that it's happening, or at least some people knew for a while. I remember watching the John Oliver interview with Edward Snowden, and he walked around and he was interviewing people in Times Square if they knew who Edward Snowden was. And most of the people were like, oh, yeah, I've heard that name. Isn't he the guy that did the drug market online? No, you're thinking of Ross Ulbricht. Isn't he the guy that did that? And, they totally had no clue who Edward Snowden was, what he did. And there were a couple of people that were like, oh, yeah, he gave secrets to the Taliban, which is not true at all. Edward Snowden gave information to journalists that journalists have revealed some of publicly, and that information wound up letting us know that we were being spied on without warrants in a lot of cases. There's still a little bit more from this petition, from the response to the petition, as well as another petition that I want to tell you about when we come back on Peace, Love, and Liberty Radio.
Why do they hate us? Is libertarianism compatible with Islam? Davi Barker answers these questions and more in Voluntary Islam and Other Essays. He advances the voluntarist cause with analysis of the confluence of values between Islam and libertarianism, as well as contemporary movements from the Tea Party to the Arab Spring. Voluntary Islam by Davi Barker is available from Amazon.com and all major bookstores. Bitcoin Not Bombs is a launching pad for nonprofits and social entrepreneurs into the financial freedom of the Bitcoin economy. Bitcoin Not Bombs offers premium publicity campaigns designed to facilitate an organization's adoption of Bitcoin as a payment system. Bitcoin Not Bombs is fully committed to being the hub of the nonprofit sector of the Bitcoin economy, maximizing the potential cross-promotion of all our clients and commercial partners. To learn more, visit bitcoinnotbombs.com. You can support FPP Radio by shopping online. Whether you're looking for precious metals, bitcoins, or books, you'll find that and more at shop.fppradio.com. Every purchase you make from one of my affiliates, like Namecheap, ExpressCoin, and Amazon, at shop.fppradio.com helps fund FPP Radio. Or you can shop directly from FPP with Bitcoin in the Bitcoin store. That's shop.fppradio.com.
You're listening to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio with Darryl W. Perry. Online at fppradio.com.
The White House has responded, and I'm not really surprised by their response. I am surprised that it took so long to respond, but I'm not surprised by the response at all. Let me continue. If he being Edward Snowden, if he felt his actions were consistent with civil disobedience, then he should do what those who have taken issue with their own government do. Challenge it, speak out, engage in a constructive act of protest, and importantly, accept the consequences of his actions. He should come home to the United States and be judged by a jury of his peers, not hide behind the cover of an authoritarian regime. Right now, he's running away from the consequences of his actions. No, I would say that he's taking responsibility, and one of the things he has done is sought political asylum because he knows that if he returns to the United States, he's going to wind up going to jail for the rest of his life. Now, the claim is he should come here and present a defense, but the charges that he's been charged with do not allow him to actually present a defense. And they say he should do what others have done. Challenge it. Well, he tried. Speak out. Well, he's speaking through journalists. Engage in a constructive act of protest. I would say that what he's done has been a very constructive act of protest, where he left a $200,000 per year job, left a supermodel girlfriend, and decided to move to Russia. I would say that that's a very constructive act of protest because it got people's attention. And that's what good protests do. Good protests get people's attention and they relay a message. And he has certainly done that. And importantly, they accept the consequences of his actions. Well, yeah, being in exile is a consequence of an action. So his choices are live in exile or live in prison. And I think that living in exile is a little bit better of an option as far as self-preservation goes. They put he should come home and be judged by a jury of his peers, but I don't think they mean that. I honestly do not. I think, if he does come to the United States, there will be a jury trial, but it will not be a jury of his peers. It will not be a dozen whistleblowers on that jury, and that's who his peers are. His peers are whistleblowers, not random people that have never heard the name Edward Snowden, or if they have heard the name, they don't know why they've heard the name, and they think that, like he was on Beverly Hills 90210 or something. The response here continues, "We live in a dangerous world. We continue to face grave security threats like terrorism, cyber attacks, and nuclear proliferation that our intelligence community must have all the lawful tools it needs to address. The balance between our security and the civil liberties that our ideals and our Constitution require deserves robust debate and those who are willing to engage in it here at home." Well, it's interesting that they chose the words they did, and I'll explain why I think it's interesting, because they're saying that they want people to engage in the debate here at home, so meaning in the United States, but they also claim that the intelligence community must have the lawful tools it needs. But what Edward Snowden revealed was that they're doing a bunch of stuff that is outside of what the law says they're allowed to do. Edward Snowden revealed that basically they're acting in unconstitutional, illegal manners, and the White House isn't happy about that. Barack Obama is not happy about it. The advisor on Homeland Security and Counterterrorism, Lisa Monaco's not happy about it. So far, of the quote-unquote major presidential candidates, none of them are happy about it. I think the only one who has come out publicly as far as any presidential candidate making a public statement about Edward Snowden, that would be me. And that means a favorable statement about Edward Snowden. I'm the only one that has said that if elected, I would pardon this man. I would pardon Chelsea Manning, and I would pardon Ross Ulbricht, and then I would give a blanket pardon for all nonviolent offenders that have no victim that are in federal prisons. And, well, there are some people that aren't happy about that. There are some people that are not happy about my anti-war position. One of those people happens to be a sheriff in Oklahoma who also claims to be an oath keeper. The story comes from reddirtreport.com, and this came out yesterday. The story says a state house member and an Oklahoma sheriff rallied against the federal government on Sunday, claiming states' rights often are ignored and their sovereignty is unprotected. The comments came during the meeting of the Oklahoma Oath Keepers, an American nonprofit organization that generally advocates its members disobey any order they believe violates the U.S. Constitution. And I had a special episode of Peace, Love, Liberty Radio on Saturday. I'll put the link in the show notes, where I actually interviewed a friend of mine who is an Oath Keeper, and we discussed a little bit about Oath Keepers and a good bit about an activism that he wound up organizing here in Keene, the military recruitment center open carry protect thing. He organized that here in Keene, New Hampshire. We had a good discussion about it. And, you know, I don't want you to think, based on this story that I'm covering, that all Oath Keepers are crazy people, because they're not. Like, I know some, and the ones that I know are very good people. Mostly. I've met a couple in the past that seem to kind of be out there a little bit. But I just, you know, I'll post the link in the show description where I interviewed Chris Reitman. Well, not really interviewed. Like, we had a 45-minute conversation about a form of activism and, you know, the goods, the bads, and things that could have been done different and why and how and whatnot. So I'll post that link in the show description. You can listen to it at your leisure. But let me get back to the article here. The group, Oklahoma Oath Keepers, met at the Mustang Community Center for 4 hours with speeches by several elected officials, including Canadian County Sheriff. Canada County is a county in Oklahoma. Canada County Sheriff Russell Edwards and State Rep Dan Fisher from Yukon, Oklahoma. Edwards, known for his opposition to a legislative proposal that would change Oklahoma's civil asset forfeiture law, apparently does not believe in the First Amendment. Edwards called for the Westboro Baptist Church members and those who burn the flag to be jailed. He also said that war protesters and those who are critical of the military, quote, should not be allowed in the country. He said, quote, people who are burning the American flag should have been thrown in jail. A comment that, surprisingly, at least surprising to me, drew a thunderous round of ovation. Or rather, a thunderous ovation. Quote, people who fly any flag above the American flag should be put in jail for treason. He also said that Westboro Baptist Church members who protest outside of soldiers' funerals would have been thrown in jail had he been in town that day. Changing to the subject of religion, he said the United States was founded on God and Christianity and not heathen religion. There's more on crazy man Russell Edwards, Randall Edwards, sheriff in Oklahoma, who wants me deported somewhere.
You can support FPP Radio by joining the Fans program. Fans are friends, allies, and numerous supporters. Fans help FPP afford to produce more original content. You can join the Fans program for as little as $3 per month or any amount of Bitcoin per month, thanks to the recurring payment options provided by Coinbase. To learn more or to join the Fans program, visit fans.fppradio.com. Coinbase is a simple and secure online Bitcoin wallet for sending, receiving, and storing Bitcoin. Coinbase also allows you to buy and sell Bitcoin using a bank account or use their tools to accept Bitcoin as a merchant. Coinbase has more than 1 million consumer wallets and is trusted by over 25,000 merchants, including Overstock.com, Khan Academy, Reddit, and of course, FPP. Get started at coinbase.fppradio.com. In 2115 New England, there are no borders, no states, and no regulations, yet never has a more peaceful and prosperous place existed. But Mr. Drake's security company has seen better days. Faced with the prospect of waning power, Mr. Drake intends to replace the anarchy of New England with a government. But at what cost? And can anyone stop him? Anarchy in New England by Joe Jarvis is available from Amazon.com and all major bookstores.
You're listening to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio with Darryl W. Perry.
Later in the meeting, Fisher, that's the state rep that was at this Oklahoma Oath Keeper meeting. Fisher stirred the crowd with several comments about state sovereignty and that the federal government apparent intrusion with state business. During his 30 minutes at the podium, Fisher quoted several historical figures, including John Adams, Patrick Henry, and James Madison, on the topic of liberty and states' rights. Fisher, who is a pastor at Trinity Baptist Church in Yukon, labeled the federal government and its massive bureaucracy a runaway mess. He said governments were created to protect people's rights. Government can only govern with the consent of the governed. Now, I agree with the second sentence there that that's at least what we're told, right? That government exists with the consent of the governed. He says, but I do not consent to giving Planned Parenthood $500 million, and I did not consent to giving $150 billion to extreme jihadists who want to kill us. That in reference to the U.S.-Iran nuclear arms proposal, adding, the only way to stop a runaway federal government is for states to stand up and say no. But yet I doubt that State Rep Dan Fisher is advocating secession. I seriously doubt that he would even support such a thing. He just wants to stand up and say, like, we need to tell them no, without actually telling them no. And let me, before I continue the article here, let me just sort of jump back to something that seems to have been glossed over in the article here, where the sheriff said that war protesters and those critical of the military should not be allowed in the country. Where exactly should I be deported to, Sheriff Edwards? Like, I was born in Birmingham, Alabama, and I grew up in Alabama. I've lived in Pennsylvania. I've lived in Kentucky. I've lived in South Carolina, Missouri, Arizona, Texas, and now New Hampshire. All places that are, the United States of America. So where should I be deported exactly? If you want to say, well, go back to where your ancestors came from. Okay, which ones? The ones that came from Germany in the 1800s, the ones that came from Switzerland in the 1700s, the ones that came from England in the 1600s. Like, take your pick. Where exactly should I be deported? And what, just because I have a different stance on using the military? Like, what about the First Amendment there, Sheriff? What about free speech? What is it about my free speech that makes you think that I should be deported? And, of course, that was not asked of him during this 4-hour meeting, or if it was not reported on in the article. Let me continue. Quoting the Federalist Papers, State Rep Dan Fisher said states' powers are numerous and indefinite, but that federal powers are limited. What right does the federal government have to tell our oath keepers they can't stand on public property and protect our military recruiters, he said, again receiving a loud ovation. Fisher said special attention to current controversies that likely will never be resolved, citing pro-life versus pro-choice, what he considers to be biblical marriage as opposed to same-sex marriage, and pro-gun versus anti-gun stances. And the reason I say what he claims to be biblical marriage is most likely he thinks that marriage is one man and one woman. But there are several instances in the Bible where one man had multiple wives. In the case of Solomon, he had 300 wives and 700 concubines. But I don't think that the state representative would support that. Like, no, polygamy is bad because Bible. But wait, like King David had multiple wives. And Abraham had a wife and a concubine. And then after the wife died, he got another wife. And all of these other people had a bunch of wives. So why is that not quote-unquote biblical marriage, but something else that you consider to be biblical marriage is? And why should same-sex couples not be allowed to get married? Like, the Bible never says same-sex couples should not be allowed to be married. It never says that left-handed people should not be allowed to be married. It never says that people that grow multiple crops in the same field should be allowed to be married. It just says, like, these are things you don't do. And whether or not you believe that those are things you shouldn't do is neither here nor there. But why pick? And this is sort of like my sort of pet peeve with some of these people that claim to be Christians and, well, we've got to follow the Bible, is they don't really do that. They like pick and choose what they want to follow. He continues, or let me go back to the article here where they quote Dan Fisher as saying, "We have irreconcilable differences, and how we resolve them, I don't know. I didn't want to force an Oklahoma mindset on the people of Massachusetts, and at the same time, I don't want Massachusetts mindset imposed on me. We are the opposite of what the original founders intended. We are not what we were then," referencing 1776. Later, Fisher condemned the Oklahoma Republican Party leadership in the legislature for paying lip service to bills that they never intended to support. He referred specifically to a measure he introduced that would have made embryonic stem cell research illegal. He also mentioned a pro-gun bill that would have been one of the strongest Second Amendment measures in the country. Fisher said that the stem cell bill was approved in the House, but failed to get a hearing in the Senate Public Safety and Appropriations Committee. He said, quote, "Why did that bill go on to those committees? Because the Republican leadership could count on those two chairmen not to hear the bill." He gave that as an example of what he referred to as legislative tyranny. "There are many times when I'm embarrassed to be known as a Republican," he said. "The leadership in the House and Senate will not let anything through that challenges their power." Earlier, Fisher quoted John Adams, who wrote in a letter to James Warren, "If ever a time should come when vain and aspiring men shall possess the highest seats in government, our country will stand in need of its experienced patriots to prevent its ruin." Fisher concluded, telling the audience of about 100, "It's time to stand up and say no while we can." Well, that is to say no unless you're protesting war, in which case the sheriff who spoke at the same rally will have you deported to some unknown location determined by him, I guess. I don't really know how he plans to do that by, we're going to deport people that were born in America because they're protesting war, and I don't like that somebody's protesting war. It seems to me the whole, if you don't want to stand behind the troops, stand in front of them, basically saying that anti-war protesters deserve to be killed or used as human shields, which I absolutely disagree with. I think that, you supposedly have the right to free speech. That includes the right to say that what the government is doing is something you don't like, even if that means that you're saying something that is not popular at all. This has been Peace, Love, Liberty Radio. Don't forget, every Wednesday is the Ask Me Anything, AMA at FPPradio.com.